Joining us right now to talk about the UK election and its result and its aftermath is Professor Andrew Tettenborn, a law professor at the Swansea University. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning to you.
So the last time we spoke, you advised me to bet against Sunak, and I have made a lot of money as a result. I'm becoming for your expertise once again. Now, can you help us break down the result of this election? People are calling it a Labour landslide victory, but also looking at the turnout rate, we also see a lot of, lack of enthusiasm when it comes to this particular election cycle. Is this as much as a Labour landslide victory, as much as a Conservative landslide defeat?
I think you're absolutely right. This was an election that the Conservative Party lost. The Labour Party vote share increased, but actually not a great deal in this election. It was very much a case of an election where people voted against the people they didn't like, rather than in favour of the people they did like. One very interesting statistic, I don't know whether it's reached Warsaw yet, is that someone did a survey of voters proposing to vote Labour, and precisely 5% of them were doing so because they liked Labour policies. Most of them were doing it simply in order to get rid of the Conservative Party, which they regarded as thoroughly incompetent. And another statistic, this is the election where perhaps the smallest number ever, the smallest proportion ever, actually voted for either of the two main parties in Britain, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. What was particularly important, I think, was the rise of other parties and indeed the large number of independents.
Professor, so how do you think Starmer will be able to deal with some of these challenges? Because he did inherit quite a bit of problems.
He did. Financially, he has very little room for movement. He will also face demands from his left wing, in particular, actually, in favor of his doing things about the Middle East in Gaza. He's keeping up very much with Ukraine. I don't know if your listeners have heard, but last night, in fact, an announcement was made in Ukraine that Britain would be very much upping its arms shipments to Ukraine. Looking forward, I think the difficulty is going to be that this is not a particularly solid, it's a very big majority, but it's not a particularly solid one. Third parties like our Liberal Democrats got a much larger number of seats than they previously had. And there is also a new party that's arisen called Reform, which although it only got 5 seats, I'm sorry, I'm checking my notes here. Although it only got 5 seats, it got 14% of the votes. And something else that people are pointing out is that our electoral system is now producing grotesque results in terms of the number of seats compared with the number of votes. For example, we had 2 parties which got similar numbers of votes. The Liberal Democrats on something over 3 million and Reform on something over 4. But because of the distribution of those votes, the Liberal Democrats got 72 seats, Reform got 5, and the Green Party, which also increased its number of seats from 1 to 4, is also seriously underrepresented in the UK Parliament.
Right, we're also seeing a similar phenomenon in France. The election just took place, and we saw the National Rally winning 37% of the vote, but somehow trailing behind when it comes to the seats. Do you think that is the results of these, and like you mentioned, only 5% of people really supporting Labour, is going to further divide the electorates and send the country to even a stronger polarization?
I'm not sure about a stronger polarization. What I think is going to happen is this, that imagine in about 3 months' time, a member of the British Parliament dies or resigns, and let's assume they're from the Labour Party. Any Labour seat is going to be very, very vulnerable to the rise in populist parties, in particular Reform. The reason for that is that very large numbers voted Reform. Much larger numbers would have voted Reform if they thought that they could win. And Reform certainly, and possibly the Greens as well, but certainly Reform are very well placed to take large numbers of seats if they fall vacant.
Professor Andrew Tettenborn, thank you, sir, for being with us this morning. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.